Okay, the queen is the strongest attacking piece that we have in the game of chess. The queen is worth, if we were to equate all of the pieces on the board to some kind of numerical scoring um, strategy, the queen is worth 9 points, where a single pawn is worth 1 point, a knight and a bishop are both worth 3 points, and a rook is worth 5 points. So how does the queen move? So in your chess continuous assessment, you need to code up the queen. But the queen is I suppose is a compound of how the rook moves and how the bishop moves. So let's have a little look at this and see how it actually works. So just looking at the code that we had the last day when we went through how to move the black pawn. Now I can see here that we already enabled the black queen to move. So if we wanted to make the white queen to move as well, simply say if piece name that equals white queen, we say valid move is equal to true. Now, both queens can move the exact same, so we don't really have to differentiate between white queen or black queen, unlike the pawns. I mean, the pawns move in a very particular direction given which pawn it is. If it's the white pawn, in our implementation of chess, it moves down the board. If it's a black pawn, it's going to move up the board, or up towards the top of your screen, or down towards your keyboard, if it's a white pawn. Okay, so I've just changed the code here a little bit to say if piece name that equals white queen, valid move is equal to true. And as we know from the last day now, we should be able to move the white queen in any particular direction at all. So I save that. I open up my terminal and I'm going to recompile the file, and I should have no errors at all. And now if I run it using the Java command, I get the little chessboard that I have. So just like the last day now, we can see that I should be able to move my queen to any given square on the board, and I can. And I can see on the left hand side here that the piece that is being moved is the white queen. The starting coordinates are 4, 0, which gives me this square here. As we count out from the exits, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's in the first row, so the y coordinate is going to be 0. It tells me that the x movement is 2, so I've moved 2 in terms of x, which is 1, 2, and then 3 in y, which is 1, 2, and 3. Now, the move actually isn't a valid queen move, and as we started the other day with the black pawn, we built up incrementally how we should move this. But let's just imagine now that the queen is sitting in this position, which is actually impossible because the queen cannot jump like the knight. But the queen is able to move. It's able to move up this way. It's not able to take its own piece, and it's able to move straight down as long as there's no piece in the way between where you want to drop off the queen or the landing square that you want to drop it off is an enemy piece. So you cannot take your own piece, but you can take an enemy piece, and it can move like a rook. So the rook moves, as we already know from the book for the continuous assessment, it moves up and down in a vertical direction and also in a horizontal direction. And we can move like this as far or as long as there's no piece in the way, and we can move directly to an end square as long as we do not have another piece, our own piece on the square we want to move to. So for example, if I wanted to move the queen all the way to this square over here, I wouldn't be able to because this black pawn is in the way. So I can move to the square adjacent, or I can take the black pawn. I cannot move past this piece, so I cannot jump over a piece. The queen also is able to move like a bishop along any diagonal. So here the queen is sitting on a black square, or a grey square, but a dark square. I can move along the diagonal as long as there isn't a piece in the way, and I end up on a square that isn't my own piece, so I can take my opponent's piece, just like the bishop can do. And again, I can move along any diagonal at all. So here I'm moving along the grey diagonal. I can keep moving as long as I don't take my own piece or jump over a piece. Now, unlike the bishop, the queen is able to change the square. So when we start off in chess, we have a bishop that traverses along the dark squares, and we have a bishop that traverses along the bright squares, or the light squares. Now, the bishop never changes its colour that it's allowed to move along. But the queen, if we simply move the queen up one square, now we can traverse along the white diagonals, as you can see here. Okay, so essentially we should understand now how the queen is moving, okay? And we can stop, and again we can move to another dark square and traverse right way down along the dark diagonal. So we understand how the queen moves. We know that the queen is worth 9 points. It has the highest possible score associated with a single piece. It's extremely powerful, and as the game of chess gets towards the middle game or the end game, the queen, it turns into an absolutely dominant piece to have as an attacker. Okay, so let's take a tiny look at the code. So inside my code here, I have if piece name dot equals the white queen. I'm not going to code it up, but just some little comments, yeah. So you can see we make that a little bit bigger. Okay. Now, so when we're inside the queen, now we shouldn't differentiate between white queen and black queen, but that's okay. So essentially what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to say if the movement is like a bishop, if the movement is like a bishop, yeah, test for a valid move. Okay, else if the movement is like the rook. Now we would say test for a valid rook. Test for a valid rook movement. Okay. Now, when you're working on the queen, you should have already implemented the bishop and you should have already implemented the rook. So essentially what you're going to have to do is take the code, understand the code, and edit it here inside the condition here to say either the queen is moving like a bishop or the queen is moving like a rook. If the queen is moving like a bishop, it moves like the bishop. If it's moving like the rook, it moves like the rook. If it's doing anything else other than those two movements, it's not a valid movement. So at the outset here, what you might do is you might say if the queen is being placed back onto the board. And then what we would say, so imagine you can say, look, if the queen's been placed back onto the board, then we would simply say, okay, that's cool. If it's moving like a bishop, cool. move it, else if it's moving like a rook, that's cool. Okay. Now remember, test for a valid move. So for the bishop, yeah, we have a valid bishop movement if the x movement equals the y movement. Now the actual code for this, or the code to demonstrate exactly how this works, is in the continuous assessment manual that you have. So we have a valid bishop movement if the x movement is equal to the y movement. So in other words, if the distance we travel in x is equal to the distance that we travel in y, we move along a diagonal. Okay, no matter which direction it is, we know that we're moving along a diagonal. And then you simply need to check, yeah, if there is something in the way, and then if there is a piece on the expected landing square, and if there is, yeah, if so, make sure that it's an enemy piece. And if it is, we have a valid move for the queen moving along a diagonal. Now there are 4 possibilities for the diagonal, as we know from moving the bishop. The rook is very similar, so we need to make sure for a valid, if we think about a valid movement for a rook, yeah, we say if there is an x movement, there can't be a y movement. And similarly, if there is a y movement, there can't be an x movement. So in other words, we either traverse on a vertical axis or a horizontal axis. So we're either moving in the y direction or moving in the x direction. We're not moving in both, yeah? And then if one of the above conditions are true, we simply make sure that there is nothing in the way and that we cannot take our own piece. Now, if we were to consider this, yeah, those 2 lines there, if one of the above conditions are true, we simply make sure that there is nothing in the way and that we cannot take our own piece. That is exactly the same as what we're doing up here. So if there is if there is something in the way, we can't actually move. If there's nothing in the way, we need to make sure that the square that we're moving to, if it has a piece, it has to be an enemy piece. Okay, so I'm not going to code it up, but the pseudocode that's there should help you design what you need to do for the queen. Okay, we'll leave it there, and just remember that the queen is worth 9 points. Okay.